Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and today I'm joined by someone I'm fangirling a little bit here. I'm so excited she's here. Nenia, I follow her on Goodreads. Thank you for being here. You have a blog, readasaurus.com. Some of y'all may recognize her from there. She's crazy, crazy brilliant. I'm so excited. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Well, I have a blog. I have an Instagram. I literally just joined TikTok, I think a month ago for the first time. And I have a day job, so I work in tech also when I'm not doing everything else. Oh, and I'm an author as well.
Oh my gosh. Work in tech. Okay. How do you, because you read a lot.
Mhm.
How do you balance, how are you, and you blog. You blog a lot. So how work-life balance, how are you balancing reading and working in tech and blogging and now you're on TikTok? How are you doing all the things?
Uh, I don't sleep much. Probably less than I should, like maybe 7 hours. But, usually just in the evenings, I wind down with a book, and then, like, when I have an appointment or if I'm going somewhere, I always have at least 2 books in the purse in case I finish one. So you have to have the backup book. And so, yeah, I guess if you really love something, like, you find ways to cram it into every, like, open gap in your life, and that's what I do with reading.
Tell me your romance origin story. How did you become a romance reader?
I joined romance as a genre pretty late in life. So, like, a lot of the stories that, like, some of the long time romance readers have is that their moms read romance. And so they were like 10 or 11 and they found that, like, copy of Sweet Savage Love or one of those bodice rippers on their mom's nightstands, right? And my mom didn't read that kind of stuff. She's like kind of like a lit snob. Like, I say that with like all the love in my heart, but she is a lit snob. Like, her
I
favorite
love it.
author is, yeah, Jane Austen. So, like, the closest I had to that was Bridget Jones. She read that because it was a Pride and
Mm.
Prejudice retelling, and she hid it from me, which meant I had to have it and find it immediately. So,
Of
like,
course, of
yeah.
course.
So that was the first romance adjacent novel that I read. I think I was 10 or 11, too young to be reading that probably, but I did. And then I had friends who got me into it when I was in my 20s, which was really nice because I was in university and I was really stressed out. I was taking finals. I was writing 20-page research papers. I didn't want to read anything that was like too high stakes. And so I felt like romance was really nice because you know how it's going to end. It's written like, in a way that's really easy to consume and like digest. And so that was a really nice palate cleanser for me in college, and that's kinda how I got into romance with paranormal romances.
Oh, that's where you started, paranormal?
Mhm, because before that I read a lot of fantasy, so it felt like the next step logically to be like, "Oh, okay, so I've done fantasy, now, like, what if they kiss also?"
So was this, during, the paranormal boom of romance? Was there romance all over the place or no?
So, I thrifted a lot of my books because when I was in college, I didn't really have a job, so I didn't have a lot of disposable income.
Mhm.
So, I thrifted a lot of my books, and there wasn't a lot of romance in the secondhand stores where I was looking at that time. And what there was, it was usually, like, either historicals or paranormal. So, yeah, it was people's paranormal cast-offs is what I ended up reading.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, I came to romance. I picked up my first romance, but I consider in 2017. I think there were books here and there
Oh,
that I'd
wow.
read throughout life that were I read a lot of Susanna Kearsley. I thought I consider
Mhm.
her historical fiction, but now that I read romance, I'm like, and she's actually writing romance. They're
Yeah.
just, I don't know, they tend to get lumped into the literary fiction section of the bookstore, but
Sneaky romance.
yeah. I and, I honestly think she would proudly say, I'm a romance reader, so
Mhm.
romance writer, it's weird, but, I think there's something special about coming to the genre late, and it's so weird for me, hearing that you came to it late because you read so crazy. Like, you read some old school romance, I would have thought you've been reading it for forever. But now it makes
No.
sense. Now it makes sense.
I got into the old school books because of Goodreads, because there's such a community for it, and so I was like, if they're this, like, passionate and obsessed, it must be worth looking into, and, once I got into them, I didn't look back. They were just so crazy, it was fun.
So making that, like, transition, having, like, read fantasy, been, like, a huge fantasy reader, and
Mhm.
then picking up paranormal in college, was it, like, instant love? Did you have to, like, do some reading a little, did it take some time to figure out what authors worked for you, what you liked, or was it, like, magically the first book you picked up just worked?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember because 'cause it's been so long. So, like, I guess the one downside to getting books from thrift stores is that, like, you get books that are, like, in the thrift store for a reason,
Yeah.
or you get books yeah, or you get books that are, like, really good and they were just kinda, like, oversaturated, and so people were like, "I'm done with this." Into the thrift store it goes. So, it did take some time to kind of parse out my likes and dislikes, but one of the things I really love about the romance genre that isn't in, like, thriller or fantasy, which I also love, is that, you're always guaranteed a happy ending. I hated it when I got invested in a character and they would kill the character off, and I'm like, "No, why would you do this?" Or, like, if there's, like, a romantic kinda relationship teased and then they never really, like, fulfill that, and so you're, like, sad and frustrated and angry on behalf of these characters you've invested like 600 plus pages in. You're just like, well, what do I do now?
So did you quickly, like, did you go super hard paranormal for a while, or was it like, okay, I've read a couple of these and now I'm going to try like this historical romance? Like, how did the branching out happen?
Oh gosh. Yeah, so I've read, pretty much any paranormal I could get my hands on. I remember there was the Black Dagger Brotherhood. I think that was, like, the gateway for a lot of people. Laura Adrian's paranormals, the Patricia Briggs Mercy series. Oh,
Mm.
and Laurel K. Hamilton. And then some of those paranormals were kind of historical, and so I think that kind of, like, got me more interested into, like, the historical element. And because of my mom, I had also read a lot of classic literature, so, like, Portrait of a Lady, Doctor Zhivago, and, like, all of the Jane Austen and, like, the Bronte sisters, and so that had kinda gotten me into historical as a setting as well, and so I feel like that kind of appealed to me even more than the paranormal did once I got into it, because it felt so familiar and it was kind of like a throwback to, like, my first love of, like, fantasy historical fantasy settings and the classic literature.
So when did the blogging start? Because I mean, I okay, when I came to romance,
Mhm.
I was heavy into, like, the YouTube space, so I was, like,
Oh, that's so cool.
watching people on YouTube, and a lot of them, like, the few romance readers that were there had blogged, but it seemed like blogging was, like, phasing out. This is, like, 2015, 2016, 2017, and so, like, then I became interested in blogging, and I kept hearing, like, "Nobody blogs anymore." But then you would get, like, these, like, author blog tours, and it's like, "Well, what's your blog link?" And I'm like, "Well, clearly it's not dead if authors are asking for links to your blog." And, like, here we are, fast forward 2023, and I see blogs like yours where you are constantly updating it with reviews, and it's like, I'm constantly reading your reviews.
Oh.
It's like, where do you, like, how did you get started with blogging? And, like, what is your how do you feel like the world of blogging fits into everything now? Like, you mentioned you just joined TikTok. I would love to hear your perspective of, like, how TikTok has potentially changed the world of blogging.
Right, yeah. Okay, so that's like a two-piece question.
Yes.
So
Sorry, I tend to do those a lot.
I love it. So the blogging, it took me a while to get into it. For a while, I was just kind of like looking at what other people write. I actually joined Goodreads before they were acquired by Amazon. I think I've been on it for over 10 years. So long
Oh
time.
my gosh, yeah.
And I joined because I was bored in a stats class, and I would just use the computer, like, for personal things before the teacher got in, and I would, like, read other people's reviews, and some of them were really funny, and I'm like, "Oh, I wanna do this," but, like, I'm really self-conscious and kinda shy, so I was like, "I don't know if I can do this." And so I just kind of like, watched for a while and then I joined and then I just kind of used Goodreads to like post ratings for a while without any reviews. And then I started reviewing and I really loved it. I think long form blogging, like traditional text blogging, is great for people who don't have a lot of self confidence and maybe want to put their opinions out there, but they don't want to like think like, am I camera ready? Like, does my voice sound funny when I'm being
Yeah.
recorded? And so I think for that, it can be like a really great kind of like entree into the world of blogging because you can just put your voice out there, but it's just your voice, unfiltered.
Yeah.
For TikTok, part of the reason I was a little hesitant about joining is one, like everyone on there seemed really cool, and I was like, oh my god, I feel intimidated. And two, I've never really liked the sound of my voice like recorded, so that was kind of like something I had to get around before
Girl, same.
joining.
And here I am. I have a podcast.
I think you have a lovely like radio voice though,
Oh,
so
thank you. I always hated my
but
voice.
it makes me feel better that I'm not alone. But everyone there was really welcoming. Like I had heard that people there could be kind of like elitist and that scared me, but like everyone was super welcoming when I joined, which made it like a pleasure. I think the book community on TikTok is really nice. And so I've started using that more. I also like how it's kind of low budget and you don't have to have a lot of production quality to make videos that do well in there. That was why I never created a YouTube because I just can't edit for beans.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can be a total amateur on TikTok and people will forgive you for it, which I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. Do you think like, okay, because TikTok at the most it's like 3 minutes, right? How do you
Mhm.
feel like that is changing the world of book reviewing?
That's a good I think it forces people to kind of create these condensed sound bites of like tropes. Usually I would say like books get condensed down into tropes. So people will be like, read this book, it has like enemies to lovers, only one bed, like friends to enemies to lovers, like and other things like that. So it makes it faster, I think, in some ways to decide whether or not a book is for you. But I think some of the more stylistic elements are lost because people don't usually do quotes. And for me at least, like the writing style is at least as important as like what tropes a book has. So like if I don't know what the author's writing style is like, I will be a little more hesitant to buy the book than if I do. So I think it depends on how people choose their books and how they read. I think if people go based on like prose and style, like TikTok might be less helpful for them. But for people who are looking for tropes and they want to be like in and out and like just gathering their books and then being done, I think it's great. And I think that's contributed to a lot of the virality of TikTok.
Yeah. With you being a writer, how do you what when you put that lens on and view it through that perspective, how do you feel about it? Because there's a lot I know a lot of authors have shared like they're being, their publicists, their publishers, they want you all to be on there. Obviously, like it's kind of a different perspective. So what do you think about it from like being a writer?
That's a difficult question. I think if you don't want to see what people are saying about your book, it can make it a little harder to escape from it
Mhm.
for some people because, there'll be like the algorithm will show you things based on hashtags you use. So I think I've seen authors saying that they get hashtags of negative reviews for their books showing up in their feed because of the hashtags being used. So I think that can be hard. Personally, it doesn't really bother me that much just because I'm my own worst critic. So like I haven't met anyone who can like negatively review me the way I negatively like review myself in my head. So that helps. I like it though, honestly. I think people get really excited. It's fun to see people get like really excited when they're talking about what they love. And so
Yeah.
as an author for me, like I think that's really exciting. I love seeing it. I love seeing younger people getting like really in love with reading. It reminds me of like why I started to love reading in the first place. And so for me, I think it's really great.
Yeah, isn't that That is really cool.
Mhm.
I feel like I have this conversation with my kids a lot. They're like, my youngest, he's only 7. He's like, "It's not
Oh,
cool to be a nerd." And I'm like, it really is."
it totally is.
Yeah. I'm like, "It's in now." I'm like,
Nerds will rule the
"Maybe."
world.
Right, I'm like, "Maybe, like, 20 years ago, it was not, but now it's pretty cool to identify as a nerd." So,
I love that.
so, like, your current I like to ask, like, your current romance era, what is it?
I am currently in a historical romance era right now. I've just been binging historical romance after historical romance.
Why do you think that is?
It's comforting. I think it's fun. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love learning about history. I'm a history nerd. So, like, I'm reading a Beverly Jenkins book right now. It's Topaz. And I love what she does with Black history and how she integrates it into her books. And so that's really fun to kind of learn about that perspective in history from her.
Are you a mood reader or no?
I'm a big mood reader. So, like,
Are you
once I get into
serious?
something, like, it will be only that thing for, like, several weeks, and then I'll shift, and it'll be another thing.
Okay, so, like, the current historical romance era, like, this is your mood right now.
Yeah, it's bad for the people who follow me sometimes because I'll get people who follow me when I'm reading, like, literary fiction or nonfiction, and then I'll start reading, like, bodice rippers, and they'll be like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Did you look at my shelves before you followed me?" Like, I will literally read anything. You knew what you were getting into when you followed me.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you find what to pick up next? Like, how are you finding recommendations?
My friends, Amazon recommendations, like the people who like this also read this,
Mhm.
Goodreads. I also go to thrift stores a lot, and so I will, like, buy covers that make me laugh. So, like, if I see, like, a really stupid, like, cheesy Fabio cover, I will buy it. Pretty covers, I will buy. So, basically anything that looks interesting or that kinda, like, intrigues me, I'll just pick it up and read it and see.
So what historical like, so you're reading Beverly Jenkins right now, like, what else have you
Mhm.
been reading in this historical era that we're in?
That's a good question. I have been reading Lisa Kleypas's "Then Came You." Controversial opinion, but I actually like Alex Rayford more than I like Derek Craven. Please don't
Okay.
egg me.
Hold the eggs at bay, people, hold the eggs at bay.
I've been reading a lot of old school Harlequin presents. So like
Yes.
Sarah Craven, Charlotte Lamb, Jacqueline Gilbert, Ann Mather, and I also have some Jane Feathers on the to read pile as well.
So, what advice do you have? Because I think there are a lot of us that are like, that we want to give the old school romance a try, but there's the one hand of like, oh gosh, what am I getting myself into? There's the like datedness of just like, oh, this is old, and it's
Mhm.
like, there's so much distance between now and when it came out. Like, am I going to enjoy this? I feel like a lot of what I see, like, if people are reading old school historical romance, it's usually like a book club and it's like a once a month thing. And then the rest of the month, they're reading their contemporaries and romantic suspense and stuff. Like it's a special event. But you're someone that, like you said, you can go to the thrift store and find like the craziest old school cover and you're like, okay, in the basket it goes and you're going to read it. So, what
Mhm.
advice do you have to people that are like wanting to give some of the oldies a try?
Yeah. So I would say like pay attention to the content warnings and trigger warnings, especially like with sensitive issues like non-con or like racist portrayals, because a lot of the books do have that and it can be very uncomfortable to read. I would say if that is like especially off-putting to you, maybe avoid anything published in the 70s or early 80s because it was like the wild wild west. I would say, like, the '90s are probably, like, a good place to start if you wanna, like, dip your toe in vintage and not be like, "What's this?"
Yeah.
Because I feel like in the '90s, like, people still wanted to write those kind of, like, epic stories, but they were starting to tone them down and try to be more sensitive to how they were portraying people of other ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and they were trying to tone down a lot of the stuff that bodice rippers were famous for, right? Like the very aggressive sexual overtures that could be happen in like a lot of those older books. They were starting to kind of phase that out. And so I think like early 90s is probably a good place to start and see. And then maybe like if you're curious about some of the summaries of older books, look at the spoiler reviews with trigger warnings and see if you can like protect yourself before going in.
Where did you like, do you remember picking up your first category romance, and was it a presents?
Yes. So I don't remember like what the first one I read was. It was probably something I had thrifted, and I don't think I liked it because I can't remember what it was and I didn't keep it.
Yeah.
But the first one I read that I loved, I think it was like a Charlotte Lamb. I think it was Savage Surrender, which is it's just such a great book because I love Charlotte Lamb's heroines. She gives them a lot more agency than some of the other presents authors did at that time. And she meets the hero because his mom almost runs her over in her car, which I thought was great. And then he's like a Greek billionaire and she just like runs circles around him because he's like, I'm great. And she's like, I really don't think so. And he's like, what? And he just does not know how to deal with her. And I love that.
They've announced the new line that's coming out called
Mm,
Afterglow that comes out in January. I think hopefully January
I'm
2024.
so excited.
I am too. Like, do you think with this line rolling out, because I feel like category still has a stigma even in the romance genre, do you
Mhm.
feel like it may encourage people to read what we already have, or no?
In the Harlequin
Yeah,
publishing specifically? Yeah,
yeah.
so, like, from what I understand, I think I actually listened to your podcast episode on it when you were talking with one of the people behind the project. It was great.
Thank you.
Um, I like the idea of trying to, like, appeal to people who want spicy books. Like, I know that's been, like, a criticism of Harlequin is that, like, they have a lot of fade to black scenes when it comes to, like, sexual content in their books. I understand that, like, with Harlequin, there's often a formula, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think, with any publication, there's, like, authors who do it really well, and maybe there's authors who do it less well. And so, like, the beauty of, like, Harlequin is that there's so many and they're so short that, like, once you find an author you really like, it's easy to go to their backlist and just devour all of their books. Unfortunately, it's, like, really fast, so then, like, when they're gone, they're gone. But yeah, I hope it gets more people interested in Harlequin. I know I had a bias against it for a while, and I was very happily proven wrong. I hope other people are too.
Do you have an author? Do you feel like you have authors now that like are, because you read a lot of the, like you said, you read a lot of the old ones, but are there any contemporary authors now, Harlequin wise, that are like automatic? 'Cause I've seen you read some Maisie Yates, girl.
Yes, I just found out, I think her pen name is, like, also Millie Adams, and I was so
Yes.
excited because I'm working my way through some of the Millie Adams, and I'm like, "Oh my god, she has, like, another pen name that I can, like, dive into." So happy. I love Megan Crane slash Caitlin Cruz. You did a podcast with her, and I
Mhm.
was, like, obsessed because I'm like, "My hero is being interviewed." I love her books. I love her historical romance also because I feel like she does kind of like do like an homage to old school Viking romances. Her I think it's called like Captive of the Viking or something like that. It
Yes,
really
yeah.
reminded me a lot of this Viking bodice ripper by Nadine Crenshaw called Eden's Embrace. And so I was like, this is like reading my favorite all over again, but with new packaging and different people.
So is like Viking historical romance like a buzzword, a catnip for you? Like, is that, if you had to pick a favorite thing in historicals, is that it? Is that it?
One of I have so many
Okay.
favorites. I'm like very fickle.
Okay.
I love medieval. I wish more people were writing medieval romances now because that's like one of my go-to genres. Because it's
What do you
like
love about them?
fantasy. Yeah. Well, it's a lot like fantasy. I feel like they have a lot of action and adventure. They have like the battles, the castles, like the court intrigue. I love all of that.
Well, you also, I have to ask you this. You really love some gothic romance, and
I do.
I am a gothic romance hoarder, okay? I don't even know if
Oh,
most of them are, I've read some of them, and some of them, like, they at a after some point, I'm like, they do tend to read the same, so I have to, like, kind of put some space in between how often I read them, but I still love them so much. I don't know what it is. I read Rebecca in 8th grade for required reading, and I think it started there, but, like, tell me your love of it, and yeah, all the things.
Oh my gosh, you have a collection. I'm like so jealous. I want to see.
Girl, when COVID kicked off, I was on eBay like everybody else, just buying boxes of books. And I
I
was just
love
getting
that.
lucky spending I'd be like $20 and I'd get like 30 Phyllis Whitneys or something. It was
Oh, I love
crazy.
S. Whitney. Yeah. So for me, the appeal of Gothic romances is like the setting. I'm a sucker for like good atmosphere. So like that's part of the reason I love medieval. I think Gothic has the same thing going for it. Like when you pick up a Gothic romance, you know what you're getting. There's going to be a creepy house. Someone's going to be like, don't touch that, or don't go in there, or don't pick up that key. And you know the heroine's going to do it. It's just like a matter of when, right? So you're just like waiting for her to do the thing that she was told not to do. And the love interest is always like, did he like kill his former wife or like governess or whatever? Probably not, but like you don't know, so you're going to read it and find out. I love that. It's just campy and it's fun.
The whole like thing is, did he do it or did he not? But he's
Mhm.
pretty hot and I'm falling for him.
Yeah, Anne Stewart does that too, and I am like coming back to her books like no other. So
Do you feel like you read a lot of new releases or no?
I try to, because one of the downsides of like retro romance is that diversity really was not represented well back then, especially. I have like a couple authors of color I've found who did publish before 1980 or 1990, but it wasn't common. And so like I try to read contemporary just because, you know, I want to read other stories. I want to like see like different types of people falling in love. But I do think my first love is vintage and retro.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I mean, tell me some of your faves, like off the top of your head. If someone right now is like, okay, I'm gonna get on Kindle, Nenia, what do I download? What is it?
For like contemporary or
Or your
gothic?
yeah, the retro, the gothic, whichever.
Ooh, okay. So Anne Stewart's historical romances are all like chef's kiss good. She has that is he the villain formula down pat. I think Lord of Danger is probably my favorite of hers because he's basically, I don't know if you watched the Aladdin TV show series when you were a kid, but he is basically like Mosenrath, like in medieval times. So if that appeals to you, like get on that. Phyllis A. Whitney, I love her. I think she's great. I think she traveled a lot. I read her like little mini bio in the back of the Kindle books that she's published, and I think she was like raised in Japan. So she
Yeah.
like had lived there. So when she wrote The Moonflower, I think it's called, her like gothic set in Japan, a lot of that was taken from like her experiences growing up there, which I loved. And Jennifer Blake, I like also. She's a bodice ripper author. She gives her heroines a lot of agency. A lot of her books are kind of set in the South, so like kind of Louisiana area, and she seems to know the region really well. And her books always have like gorgeous details of clothes and architecture and food. So I would recommend her. And a lot of her books are on Kindle Unlimited, I believe.
So writing wise, like what do you enjoy writing? Like are you working on anything now?
Yeah, I'm currently serializing 2 books on Kindle Vella, which I will then publish on Kindle Unlimited, Kindle when they're done. One of them is a dark fairy tale romance that's kind of a retelling of Tamlin and the Ballad of Reynardine. And then the other one is book 5 in a series that I started when I was a teenager, called the Horrorscape series.
Oh my so it's horror?
Yeah, it's like horror, erotic horror, sort of with like romantic elements. I'm a little hesitant to call it like a romance because the heroes are so horrible, but yeah.
That's the world we live in.
Yeah,
I mean, do you read dark romance or no?
I do. I have to be in the mood for it though, because I feel like they have a very oppressive sort of atmosphere, and it can be hard to read that if you're not in the right mindset for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when I am, I love it.
So at what point did the writing bug hit you or was it always there? Did you always want to be a writer?
I've been writing since I was a child. Like
Oh,
I would rewrite endings to books I didn't like as a kid.
that's how it starts.
Yeah. So there was like this one babysitter's book, I think, where like it ended really badly and I was angry. And so like I wrote this like revenge ending where like the person I didn't like got punished by every character in the book.
A revenge plot to a BSC book. I love it.
It's so embarrassing, but I did do that.
No, I love it. I didn't grow up reading Babysitter's Club. I was a Goosebumps kid, and I just felt like I can't stray too far from this. I did try a couple of Boxcar Children, but like now I've been reading the Babysitter's Club mysteries. And
Oh,
I
yes.
love them. I'm
They're
like,
so
what
good.
was I thinking? I would have loved these as a kid.
They're so good. The Sweet Valley Twins Super Chillers were also quite good.
Oh, I gotta look for those. Yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
I was like such a horror kid that I'm like, you would have enjoyed these horror and mysteries.
Yeah. When
So
those gothic.
you've always been writing like, do you feel like now is like the first time in a while you've like had the time or the desire to like really sit down and take it seriously, like, or have you been writing this entire time?
Yeah, I've been writing on and off my whole life. I used to publish my stuff for free. Like I would serialize it, and then my parents were like, you could probably just self-publish this and get money. And I'm like, really? People would pay money for what I write? Seems sus, but okay. And people did, so I'm still shocked. It
Girl.
feels like I'm running a scam. Like,
No. No. So like contemporary wise, like you're in the mood for something contemporary, like who or what are you picking up?
contemporaries. Well, I love Harlequin now. I love to read. I mentioned Caitlin Cruz. I like her stuff a lot because it has like kind of gothic throwbacks in it. I like a lot of the young adult fantasy novels that have been coming out, like Adeline Grace's Belladonna, I think is really good. Love The Cruel Prince. I just read Fourth Wing, actually, and everyone who follows me was like, "You're gonna hate it because you hate everything that's popular." And I'm like, "Thanks, guys." But I loved it. I thought it was really well done for what it was. So that was nice. I've pre-ordered book 2 already.
Oh my gosh. No, I love it when like people feel like you're not going to like this because they've read enough of your reviews and you're like,
Right.
surprise guys, I actually really liked it.
Yeah, I'm not a hater. I have one book that's popular that I didn't hate.
Oh my god. I have to ask because you like again, like I said, like I get on Goodreads most of the time just to see if there's an update from you. You
Oh, that's so
will
sweet.
you'll be reading like you'll have like 100 current reads at a time. And I'm like, what is her mindset behind this?
I have trouble sticking to just one. I don't know what it is, but like I get itchy if I don't have like more than one book that I'm reading.
What you're currently reading right now is 137
Okay, that
books.
number is a lie. Like some of those are books that I've lost or like put down and couldn't find again or
I
didn't like
love
that
it.
was like too polite to like give it a 1 yet.
I love it because to me, it's like that reminder of like, you don't have to take this too seriously. That's what I get from following you. It's like, you
Oh, my
don't take it too.
Goodreads like reading challenge is like 5,000 and I'm not gonna do that.
Oh my gosh, I love it. At the beginning of every year, you will post your Goodreads challenge and it's like 5,000 and people are like, "What?" And you're like,
Yeah.
"Guys, clearly I'm not going to read 5,000 books."
It's amazing how many people think it's true though, like I love that for them that they think I can do that.
Recommendations. What did you bring for us?
Oh, this was hard. I took notes. Okay, so I am going to recommend Fourth Wing because I think like if you love romantic fantasy and you want to feel like the warm, fuzzy vibes of like the 2010s like kind of YA boom, it's like reading The Hunger Games for the first time all
Oh,
over again.
wow.
That was kind of
Okay.
like how I felt while reading it. And so I think if that appeals to you, you will love The Fourth Wing. I also have When Angels Fall by Meagan McKinney. So McKinney is one of my auto-buy authors. Sadly, I don't think she's publishing anymore, but she has a pretty good backlist. About half of them have been re-released in ebook and half of them have not, but they're still semi-affordable. And When Angels Fall is an ebook, and it's just great. It's this kind of childhood friends slash lovers to like enemies. The hero is named Ivan. The heroine is named Lissa. And he's been like obsessing over her for like 10 years. And so, like, when they meet again, she's like, oh no, because, like, when they left, she had wronged him. And so, like, it's this intense kind of like Wuthering Heights-esque story of like obsession and passion and ruin, but it has an HEA, unlike Wuthering Heights, spoiler. So if you love the vibes of Wuthering Heights but hated the ending, I think this would really appeal.
I love that. Okay.
And then I have The Duke's Wager by Edith Layton. The way this starts out cracks me up. So the heroine accidentally goes to the opera on the day when all of the courtesans are going to the opera. She doesn't know that because she's new in town. And so she creates quite the stir. It's considered like a traditional style of Regency, so it doesn't have any open door sex scenes, but I wouldn't really call it a clean romance either, because she's kind of the focus of this bet between two really debauched and depraved men. One is a duke and one is a marquis. The duke tries to kidnap her to like make her his mistress, and she's like, I don't want that. And so he's like, well, I'll make you a bet then. Like, if you can't find an honorable position, like, you have to be my mistress. And then the marquis is like, I don't like the duke, so I'm going to try to steal like his girl out from under his nose before they can finish the bet. And so it becomes like this, who is she going to end up with, and what are these two like men capable of sort of story. And I really like that. And then I have The Duke of Shadows by Meredith Duran. It's one of my favorites. It was her debut book, which makes me so jealous because it's one of the most polished and amazing and haunting historical romances I've ever read. It's about this man named Julian who's of Indian descent, and this artist named Emmeline, or Emmeline, I don't know how you pronounce it. But they meet in India, and then just before the rebellion of 1857. And so like you see like this war-torn country, and it's basically like a total like jab in the eye of colonialism, and like seeing these two characters bond against like this backdrop of pain, and like kind of finding solace in each other and like getting revenge over this like hateful man together is really satisfying to see.
I just
And
pulled up the
then
cover. I just pulled it up and I'm like, oh man, I'm so intrigued.
yeah,
Okay.
it's such a good cover. I actually own it in paperback because I'm like, I need this in my life. And then I have The Misted Cliffs by Catherine Asaro. This is a fantasy romance, so I know a lot of people want fantasy romance now. And I would describe this as like a book that's written by like a 16-year-old girl who likes Arwen and is writing Arwen and My Little Pony fanfiction like in her bedroom, but like
Oh
in the
my
most
gosh.
highest complimentary way. So like the hero is named Dark Cobalt and her name is Melody. Her mother's name is Chime. His mother's name is Dancer. Like, it's so ridiculous, but it's really well done. Like, he forces her to marry him basically because otherwise he'll like conquer her country. And so it's like a marriage of convenience between like this really villainous guy who's got an even more villainous grandfather. It kind of has like Kylo Ren vibes almost, but like fantasy.
Mhm.
So I would recommend this for people who love villain romances, but maybe are a little afraid of some of like the scarier villain books out there, because it's actually a pretty gentle read. Like, he's kind of like a cinnamon roll on the inside, even though he loves conquering.
Oh, why do you like people are wanting fantasy romance. Like what is going on that we want fantasy romance so much?
That's a tough question to answer because, like, trends are so unpredictable and cyclical, right? Like, something will go out of fashion and then it'll come back. I do think that maybe the popularity of Fourth Wing has contributed to that because
Okay.
now people are like done and they want more. But I think there's already kind of been like a move into that because of like, people want cozy witch stories.
Yeah.
And so I feel like cozy witch stories are kind of like the gateway drug into more like hardcore fantasy romances, because once you get that first taste of magic, you're like, I want more.
Do you think paranormal is ever going to like fully come back?
I think so. I think there was already kind of like a return to vampires pretty briefly, like last year. So I think like, it just depends on what popular books end up trending and what does well. And then I think more publishers are going to pick that up and more people are going to want to write it. And then we'll probably have like another boom.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like what we have gotten has been more of like the little bit of paranormal, and I'm speaking traditional publishing here, guys, but like it has been more like cozy or romantic comedy. Like, I don't know if we'll go the dark route again. which would be fun, but I feel like we're maybe like treading the waters to see how it does.
Yeah. I think if there is like a dark paranormal romance trend, it would probably be with like indie
Yeah.
writers and indie publishers. That seems to be like where a lot of like the dark romances are coming from.
Yeah, yeah. So are and you I mean, if you have any other recommendations, I want to hear them, but I just was like listening to the and I'm like, does she read mostly are you mostly an e-reader or do you mostly do physical books or audio?
I would say it's about half and half. So I
Okay.
have like a whole bunch of paperbacks like everywhere. Every room has books in our house in piles. But I also have a Kindle app that I use pretty frequently too. And so I just switch off.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I have one more recommendation. I'm
Okay.
cheating. It's the entire Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. Have
Oh
to read
my
all of them.
gosh.
Yes, they're
I
so
I
good.
I think I have the first 3 and I have not read. I tend to want to have
What?
all of the series before I start because I just know, especially if it's like a series that's done, because I'm like, if I love them, I wanna be able to
Mhm.
just read them. So,
Yeah.
I love that that's one of your recommendations. Okay, why should we read the series?
I'm honestly surprised it isn't a TV show already because I feel like it's like the perfect blend of like cinematic but also like scalable. Like every book has like a mini plot that's resolved within that book, but like each book builds off of the previous, which is exactly what I want in a series that kind of follows the main couple for multiple books because you want to see them like grow and develop and interact and change, but you also want each book to kind of resolve. And I love the whole like family dynamic of Nevada's the Baylor's family, and I love that the second trilogy is her younger sister and her romance. And they've managed to make both of the women characters very different, which I like because they're both powerful in their different ways, but they also have very real vulnerabilities that they also have to overcome that makes them feel quite relatable.
What reading wise is next for you?
I have a little pile next to me actually. So,
Okay.
one I'm gonna read is called Madame's Deception. It's about this like blue stocking who accidentally inherits a whorehouse.
As you
So
do.
she doesn't know what to do with that, and I don't know what she's gonna do with that, but I want to find out. I also have a gothic romance called Dark Surrender by Laurel Collins, which looks really good. It's set in Maine, and it's between two brothers who have like a secret old feud between them, and she's there, so that sounds exciting. And then I found a book set in Spain, which I had never seen as a location for a historical romance. It's called The Eagle and the Dove by Jane Feather, so I'm going to be reading that soon too.
Well, I will be, keeping up with your reviews of those. I cannot wait. Tell everybody where they can keep up with you online, like plug all your stuff.
Okay, yeah. So on TikTok and Reddit, I'm Nenia Campbell. On Threads and Instagram, I'm always Bee Booked, and that's B with two E's, like Bumblebee. And then on Goodreads, I'm just a stone's throw away. You can just type in Nenia Campbell, and I'll pop up because I'm an author. So yeah,
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and letting me pick your brain. This was just everything. This was so fun.
it was so fun too. Thank you so much for having me.